Thank you, veterans. Chapter 6. Annabelle's Ideas Prevail. The next day at school, Annabelle was called to the principal's office first thing in the morning. She wondered what on earth she did to get this uncommon invitation. Annabelle was an A-plus student and very active in the school, so she knew it wasn't anything related to academics or discipline. She became a little nervous as she walked down the long hallways. She wondered if it were family related or if anyone was hurt. All sorts of thoughts raced through Annabelle's mind all at once. When she arrived, she saw her teacher sitting in the office along with Mr. Jefferson. "Oh, Annabelle, come in. We were expecting you," Mr. Jefferson said, welcoming her into the office. "Am I in trouble or something? Usually kids only come to the principal's office when they're in trouble or if something bad has happened," Annabelle said quickly. "Really? Those are the only reasons? Then starting next week, I am going to start inviting groups of students to my office for good behavior too," Mr. Jefferson said with a smile. "Well, that's a great idea, Mr. Jefferson," Annabelle said in a relieved tone. Mrs. Mitchell looked surprised and then smiled, too. "So then why am I here?" Annabelle asked, looking around. "I was told by Mrs. Mitchell that you came up with a great idea for our veterans. Can you share your idea with me?" he asked. "Oh, sure, Mr. Jefferson. I was thinking that we could find out which students have a veteran in their family and then have a special celebration for them here at Melville School," Annabelle said with excitement. "I think that's a magnificent idea," said Mr. Jefferson. "I would like you and Mrs. Mitchell and your entire class to organize this grand event. Do you think you'll be able to put this together?" Mr. Jefferson asked. "Absolutely. Mrs. Mitchell could head up this project, and then we could organize groups and use a lot of teamwork," Annabelle replied without a second thought. "I like the sound of that, and I like your spirit, Annabelle. I know this project is in good hands," declared Mr. Jefferson. Mrs. Mitchell looked as if she agreed and seemed to love the plans for what was going to happen. Annabelle was bursting with excitement as she and Mrs. Mitchell left Mr. Jefferson's office. A few questions came to Annabelle's mind, so she began to question Mrs. Mitchell as they walked down the hall together. "So how are we going to start things off, Mrs. Mitchell?" "First, I think we should outline a plan of action and then see how we can best carry it out," Mrs. Mitchell answered. "That sounds like a good strategy, Mrs. Mitchell. Are you going to do that as our lesson for today?" Annabelle asked. "Absolutely, because we have no time to waste." Mrs. Mitchell was absolutely right. They had about 7 days to plan this if they wanted to do it on Veterans Day. "Are you sure we're going to have enough time to pull everything together so quickly?" Annabelle questioned her teacher. "I'm not too sure, but we can definitely do our best," Mrs. Mitchell assured her. "This would be a very big undertaking, and time would be an important factor. Maybe they would need more time to really pull this off well." Annabelle kept thinking and thinking about it all. When they arrived in the classroom and told everyone what had happened in the principal's office, the class all clapped their hands. Mrs. Mitchell immediately started working on a plan by writing an outline on the board. Now that Annabelle was seeing her idea unfold, she really began to think that they would need more time to pull things together before Veterans Day. Just then, Annabelle had another idea. She didn't even speak to Mrs. Mitchell about it privately first. She just raised her hand, and when she was recognized by her teacher, she spoke. "Mrs. Mitchell, do we really have to have this program on Veterans Day? What if we combine it with our Thanksgiving activities and do it a few days before Thanksgiving?" Annabelle suggested. "Yeah, then we could have a Veterans Thanksgiving celebration," Caitlin added. Mrs. Mitchell thought about this idea for a minute as the class gave their input on this suggestion. "I think that's a great idea because it combines both holidays in a positive way," Jamal said. "I think we should celebrate each holiday separately because they stand for different things," Jeannie said. "We can still celebrate the holidays separately in school. We just want to have the celebration for the veterans as a token of our thankfulness to them. And it just so happens that we're doing it near Thanksgiving time, Annabelle explained. I think it's a great idea, and it gives the class more time to plan and prepare, Lila said. Also, they already have celebrations on Veterans Day for the veterans, Barry reminded them. They have a big parade down Main Street where the mayor gives a speech and they serve dinner for the veterans at the Civic Center. I think we should keep the celebrations for the veterans on Veterans Day and stop trying to change things around all the time, Victoria said. To Annabelle, for some reason, Victoria's response seemed as if it were aimed only at her in a mean way, but Annabelle didn't let that bother her at all. Mrs. Mitchell decided to put the suggestion to a vote. All in favor of doing the celebration a few days before Thanksgiving Day, raise your hand, Mrs. Mitchell instructed. Everyone raised their hand except two students, Jeanie and Victoria. So Annabelle's idea was a winner. Mrs. Mitchell invited a small group of students to join her for an early meeting the next morning before class started to help discuss some ideas to present to the others. Annabelle and Caitlin were in the special planning group. Mrs. Mitchell asked everyone to bring some ideas to the table, and that's exactly what Annabelle and Caitlin were going to do. Chapter 6 is finished. I have a question for you. Why was Annabelle nervous about being called to the principal's office, and what did Mr. Jefferson want with her? Discuss this with your friends.